Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And we got a little good episode here today, a fun one. It's going to be on whether you'd like to live 150 years in the past, 150 years in the future, or any other length of time in the past or future. This one was suggested to us by Stephanie Anderson. So without further ado, let's get this one started. So I have a time when I'd like to live, and it's not as far back as people would think. I'm not a fan of the future. I think technology scares me more than anything else. So I would go back into the past, but I wouldn't go that far back. I would go back to the World War II era. That's when I would like to live. I'd like to live in the 1930s and 1940s. I just think that was the golden age, especially if we're talking like living where we are now. You know, in America, I think that would be a really, really interesting time to live, just for the fact that I think values were really solid back then and people were very unselfish. They did things for the greater good back then.
Yeah, I feel like upon hearing the question, I instantly thought, oh, future for sure, just because of technology. I mean, we talked about that a lot. And, you know, sports, I mean, they've only gotten better as far as the advancement in the human body, as far as how skilled they are. But the more I thought about it, the more scared I got as far as the fear of the unknown. I mean, who's to say that the future is going to keep on progressing like this? So I would definitely say the past. I would kind of go in maybe like the 60s or 70s.
It's all about that good time.
Just because it seemed like it was a fun time. It seemed pretty easy living. You know, the dad goes to work, the mom stays home and watches the kids. And
then they all come back home and do a little drugs. We're good to go. 60s and 70s, baby.
That doesn't sound bad at all. Sorry, I started laughing when he said about the future and how there's a good chance that it's not going to be as great as everybody thinks. I'm like, wouldn't it suck if you're like, oh, I'm going to time travel to the future, and you end up nobody's fucking around, everybody's dead,
it's a fucking wasteland
flames everywhere. Gosh, shit. It's a waste of a first wish. I still think I'd go to the future, though. As much as the past is cool and all, and you kind of know what you're getting into, so you can pick and choose where you would go. I think my curiosity and just my personality, I would love to see how things would be in the future. I would love to see how, like you said, sports. I'd love to see if the NFL got changed, because there's so many rules that I want to see changed, but they're not going to happen until the future. I want to see how many championships the Lakers got by that point.
The same as right now.
I want to see if the Falcons finally get a Super Bowl.
He wants to see if they clone Kobe and bring him back and they win more championships that way.
But I would also like to see, I mean, depending on how far in the future we're allowed to go. I mean, if it's any set in time, are we still going to be able to see ourselves in the future? Is that part of it? Am I going too deep into the question?
No, I think there's no right or wrong on how you're going to take the future, because we have no freaking idea what's going to happen.
Definitely would want to go into the future and be able to see how my life turned out, and then maybe use that to my advantage.
Would you want to go to a point where you're already passed away so you can see your full life legacy, I guess you could say?
My kids hate me.
I mean, that's a tough one, because then you'd have to know exactly when you're going to pass, and you don't really know that. So I would just take a leap, say like, all right, let's say...
Well, if you just go 100 years in the future, odds are you're going to be dead in 100 years.
But who knows? I could be frozen and put in somebody's freezer.
With advancements in modern science and my high level of income, there's no reason I couldn't live to be 250, 300.
Easy. But no, I'm definitely going to go with future. But no, all joking aside, I think it would be cool to see the advancements and see how things just kind of transition from where we're at now to, because look how quickly technology has taken over the last just 15 years. I could only imagine 20, 30 years from now. Who knows what's going to be going on?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting when people talk about the future with so many unknowns. You look at different stages of time when like famous authors have written about the future. Like for me, like Jules Verne, when he wrote The Time Machine and he goes into the year, I think it's around the year like 3000, and the human race is kind of, his idea was that the human race was going to subdivide into two things, where people lived above ground, and those were the people that were, you know, intellectually enlightened, and they were, you know, they had all the advancements of the future. And then there were people that lived underground that the people above were scared of. The peaceful people above were scared of at night. And those were the people that ran the underlying, you know, ground, and they would come out at night and hunt the peaceful people. And it's weird how, like, when we think of the future, it's always an absolute. It's either going to be really good or it's going to be really bad. It couldn't just be normal like it is right now.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. And
Dun, dun, dun.
Well played.
But yes, the future, I mean, the way that it's going right now, you think that's probably going to stay the same. Just technology doesn't make small advancements year. I mean, every year we get a brand new phone. Every year we get a new laptop that has newer, better things. So who's to say that after 20 years we don't create like a Skynet and then the world's just destroyed in the future?
I mean, yeah, no one's to say. I mean, we have no idea. That's the whole cool thing about going into the future. I think with this question, the cool thing to think about would be if we are to go back or forward, do we have to stay there? Because does that change your answer? If you were to go into the past and you're like, all right, you get plopped into World War II era and you have to stay there from then on and relive your life, would that still be your answer of where you want to go?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm really cool with that. I think there was enough advancements in medicine for me to have a good chance of surviving. Now, if you're talking like the Roman days, I'm dying so fast.
But with that, with you knowing what you know and going back, would you be afraid of the whole butterfly effect of changing the past?
So are we talking about time travel now, or are we talking about...
I think you would have to. I mean, you can't go from now and go somewhere else and not consider it time travel.
That's true. I guess we're talking more about that than just living in that era.
Let me go watch that movie really quick and I'll be right back.
I'd be really scared about going back and changing things. I think I'd get a little power hungry. I'd be like the wizard that everyone came to because I had the knowledge of the cellular phone, or like all these, you have a automatic machine gun? What the heck? Like I think I get burned at the stake though. I think that's the worry about going into the past with knowledge. Anything that was different back then, it was like, oh, well, let's drown him. If he floats to the surface, he's a witch. If he stays down there, oops, are bad. Like
the town crazy person. Oh, that's just Danny. He's got all kinds of ideas.
Couldn't you say that about going in the future, though? I mean, showing up with all this old technology.
You'd just be the town idiot at that point.
You'd be the ultimate hipster. But ultimate hipster.
You'd really have no money, though. Because who's to say that money would be the same in the future? I mean, let's say 100 years down the road, let's say the money that we know today is completely gone. Let's say it's kind of like if we go off of the movie Back to the Future, Biff pays the taxi using his thumb.
But isn't that the cool thing about going into the future is that you don't know? Like, why would you want to go somewhere that you already know how it all went down? It's not going to be any different. You're just going to be living there. It might be, and like you said, the future might be the same it is now. So, I mean, how much different really was the past? We only see the past differently because we're living a different lifestyle. Once you get into it, you're still going to be going to work, still be going to do the same things. Why not go to the future where you don't know? It could be completely different.
I think the reason why is just because when we look at the past, we know how life was and how much simpler it was. Who's to say it's going to be that simple in the future?
Ask your parents how simple it was. I doubt that they would say that it was a simple lifestyle. I'm pretty sure it was harder for them than it was for us. We're sitting here doing a podcast and they were there working their asses off just to make sure they can get by.
I mean, I'd say it's simpler because back then there was only 2 bathrooms, so.
Whole nother podcast right there, but that was awesome. Shit, that came out of nowhere. It's too many choices nowadays. There's way too many choices, Trevor. He's brought the house down on that one. Oh, man.
Good point.
The simplistic argument does win right there. No, I think that people back in the day, in the past, they had, especially if you're going to go back farther than 100 years, if we're going to go back, like say Civil War era, the 1860s, you go back any farther than that. I mean, there was no knowledge of disease. There was no knowledge of anything else. I mean, people were either trying to stay alive or not stay alive. That's how simple choices were. And now we've almost reached a stage where life's pretty damn secure. I mean, unless you're going to die in a tragic accident or get a really tragic disease, like you're pretty good. You're not going to die of a common cold anymore, like compared to the odds of that happening back in the day. You got diarrhea back in the day, the Oregon Trail, Daniel has died of dysentery, like everyone died of dysentery. I remember asking my mom that, what's dysentery? She's like, oh, that's like really bad diarrhea.
Yeah. That's a shitty way to go.
Literally. Imagine that carved on your tombstone. And I've seen those. I've gone to like old state parks and seen what people died of back in the day. And they'll like list all these diseases for posterity. You are put down that you died from shit.
I sit here and I think about it and I'm thinking, all right, when we were younger, we were looking at our parents and we thought oh man, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know. You guys are old. You don't know how life is. And then we get older and we're like, man, I wish I could go to the past. It was so much easier back then. So, I mean, which is it? Was it better in the past or is it better in the future? Or is it just on your perspective?
I think it's very perspective basis because you know what happens. I mean, it's hindsight's 2020. I mean, that's the perfect example of this argument. And just knowing what was there makes it easier to choose that, just because you know what was going on. I mean, it's just like when I said the 60s and 70s, you guys were talking about drugs and living the good times. I mean, we know that happened during that era. In 50 years, I mean, nobody knows.
I think that, like in our little panel here of 3 people, our little study group here, we had 2 people that chose past and 1 person that chose future. And I would honestly think that would probably be close to what people would choose. I think it'd be about 60-40 at least, because just look at the styles nowadays. We got this whole hipster craze going on now. It's this yearning for the past. And I think human beings, just in our nature, we have a nostalgic yearning for the past. We want to know what it was like to experience that. Why is history such an exciting thing? We go back and we look at it and we go, man, that is really interesting that people, they wore buckles on their hats and buckles on their shoes. Gosh, those pilgrims, why did they do that? They obviously had a reason for doing that.
Right. And I agree. I mean, the history, it's making a comeback for a reason because people think it's interesting. It's something different. But you also look at it, look how groundbreaking it is when some new technology comes around and it blows everybody out of the water because of how different and something that they never thought could happen. So I think that's why the future is so interesting to me personally. It's just because it's that unknown and the idea that, holy crap, what could possibly be out there that we don't even already know about. So I don't know. That's my go-to for the future. I just think it's cool to think of stuff that you have no idea could be even a thing.
I think the reason why I picked the past is simply because I'm going to be able to see that future. I mean, as long as nothing crazy happens, I should be able to see what technology holds in the next 40 years. Whereas the 60s and 70s, there's no way for me to be able to live in that moment because it's impossible, unless time travel does happen, for me to experience those moments. I can experience the year 2030. I can experience the year 2040.
But you can't do 2020 or 2020. No.
Math was not Noel's strong suit.
I'll edit that part out.
2234.
But you can't do 2738.
Yeah, technically, I went wrong because it could go on forever. We don't know.
25,000 years from now, the Earth's precession of the equinoxes will happen.
To be fair, I mean, to go 1,000 years back, I mean, that'd be insane too. Who knows what was going on back then? We're talking like...
Literally, we're talking the
Stone
Dark
Ages.
Ages. Yeah, we're talking where it took hundreds of years to build a cathedral, and like your great grandkids would be the one that would see the finalization of your work.
I mean, nuts.
It's mind boggling to think though how small of a blip that is on the scale of things. I was just reading a book called Fingerprints of the Gods that was written in the 90s by Graham Hancock, and he is a really interesting guy on what he thinks about.
Been dying to read that.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I'll let you borrow it. It's fascinating how he thinks of how whole civilizations might have existed before the Egyptians and stuff, and how they've just been forgotten, and really how small of a blip our modern day is.
Like Graham's whole thing was, I mean, obviously he goes off of other people. He's more of a reporter,
yes,
or whatever. But his whole thing was there was a civilization that passed on their ideas to other people. What were they? The hunter and gatherers. They would pass on their knowledge to them, which made it possible for them to build certain things. That was his whole theory, right?
Yes. Yeah. His whole theory for the last 20 years or so has been that there was like a master race, that there was some kind of calamity, because every religion has that, the great flood epic. We have Noah in the Bible. The Hindus have one. South Americans speak of the Viracochas coming, these people from across the sea that have beards and they're Caucasian, and they came over and they imprinted this knowledge of astronomy and navigation and all this kind of stuff. But it's just interesting to think that you start thinking of, okay, they're talking, whenever he's dealing in his book, he's talking about 15,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. And we start thinking that, wow, in 1900, they hadn't even flown a freaking plane yet. And now we're making trips with hundreds of people across the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. And 100 years to us seems like a long time ago. Like, we can't picture a world without the internet. And yet these people, it just, in thousands and thousands of years, we have such a small scope on years. We just can't understand it.
And that's the thing. I think if I were to pick the past, I think I want to go that far back, like thousands of years, just to see how much of those actual theories and ideas were true or not. Because, I mean, it's all real guessing at this point. I mean, you find an artifact and you're just assuming what it is. You don't actually know because you weren't there. I mean, they have science to try to guess and figure out what it could have been, but to actually be there and know would be nuts.
That's so hard though. If you go back 1,000 years, because I mean, just like Danny's talking about how we're able to travel so far and we're able to see things so quickly now with the internet that we're able to talk to people in New York and to Australia. If you travel to the past 1,000 years, let's say you land in Modesto, California, just for the sake of argument, you're only allowed that certain sense of area.
Oh, yes, yeah, you wouldn't really know what else is going on around you because you're just
That's true.
Yeah,
you're stuck there. I mean, unless you have like a horse, but only then you can travel so far.
Yeah, I think just us having this discussion and talking about thousands and thousands of years ago, it shows the fascination that we have with the past, and that's why I think most people would choose the past over the future, just because that extreme fascination will like, oh man, I want to know the whole story. We as human beings, we have this inward need to have completion. Like we want to know everything. And especially in this day and age, like you were talking about with the internet, and want this ability to touch, 6 billion people and know what's going on in every corner of the world as it's happening. We have this inward desire to just know the whole story of everything. And I think that's why the past is so fascinating, because we don't know everything about it.
Right. It's like this epic cold case that nobody knows the answers to.
Yes, those damn CSIs that suck people in for hours after hours because I know that guy killed him,
that is true. I mean, that in that sense, I could see why most people would pick past, because the curiosity definitely of wanting to know the truth and everything behind that. But I don't know, man. The future to me is just so interesting. It could be so awesome just by the little things. I mean, what could the internet could possibly do in the next 100 and 200 years, or civilization? Where are we going to be at? Like you said, there might even be money in the future. Who knows?
They're already starting that. I was listening to a podcast that had Andreas Antonopoulos, who's the founder of Bitcoin, and he's already talking about how like it's not in the news anymore. Like Bitcoin isn't like a big thing anymore, but it's growing without anyone talking about it. And there's your whole portfolio is controlled by codes online now. Like he keeps a vast majority of his money, and he gets paid so much faster when he's doing international stuff just by, having this 16-digit code that you have that controls all your money. And it's easier to just pick up and go from one spot to another. You don't have to like grab a whole bunch of, close your bank accounts down and all this stuff. It's a fascinating podcast.
Well, isn't that, they're starting to make transitions where all your money is going to be on one card type thing, where you don't even need multiple cards for different bank accounts. It's all going to be on one, and you just...
It's already happening. It's already happening.
That just blows my mind, that the fact that, I mean, this is just the start of the iceberg for technology. I mean, we're not even close to the tip. Who knows what's going to happen? Especially with virtual reality. That's the one that's really been boggling my mind lately. I want to see how far that gets taken.
Noel's a future guy.
I am, man. I watched The Matrix way too many freaking times. I want to be jacked in.
Do you think you just learn jujitsu just by plugging a little program in?
Yeah, tell me that wouldn't be freaking awesome.
Fucking impossible. You can't do that.
It would be cool though.
You got to do it.
I mean, we have said the brain is a muscle, and what if you trick that muscle into thinking that it knows these things?
But do you really know it if you actually have it imprinted in, and your body's doing what it was imprinted to do? You don't actually know it.
Well, I can get your argument there though, because I mean, if you think about like people that use steroids, they're not as strong as people that lift traditionally, because it's like almost in a sense fake muscle.
Hold on. What about when people say that if you listen to like an audio book or something when you're during your sleep, and you wake up and you just know that knowledge just from listening to it? That's a thing. It is a thing. Google it.
That's some trippy shit.
Yeah. So who's to say that you can't learn jujitsu by being programmed in or something like that? It's just the possibilities are there. I don't like people that say that's impossible, because internet was impossible 100 years ago.
Yeah, I think
that wasn't even an idea then.
That's where like even Back to the Future gets it wrong, or like any of the 70s or 60s movies. No one foresaw the internet coming. We're like, fuck hoverboards. We've got this thing where we can have all the knowledge of the universe in one spot that is just in the air around us.
But they had flying cars, so I think they kind of trump us a little bit.
They trump us a little bit. The flying cars are going to be huge. It's going to be huge cast.
Huge cast. That's why, man, I don't know why this doesn't just make you guys want to go into the future so much more, because there's just so much unknown.
I wouldn't, like I said, like initially think about it, like, yeah, of course I would pick the future just because of...
You could find out if your kids are going to be serial killers, man.
But if I move to the future, aren't I missing out though? Am I still going to be?
I mean, if they're serial killers, you're not missing out on much. You don't want to be there for that.
But think about it. If I travel to the future, am I still going to be here in the present to raise them, or am I in the future?
That's if we did. That's if the question is if we get stuck in the future or if we get to come back. I mean, that's.
But we're altering a timeline though, because if I go to the future to see how my life turned out in the future, am I even in the past to have that future?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one.
Yeah, man, see, that's the thing with time travel. Like
that's why time travel, they don't touch that in media, because it's so hard to the alternate timelines and everything. I mean,
it's very tough. So I guess then we have to ask the question: do we ever think time travel is going to be possible? I say no.
I don't see how it could. Well, I mean, we talk about internet. I mean, just because we don't think it's possible doesn't mean it isn't possible.
I think. Oh man, I'm not one to say it's impossible. I don't think that's a good thing to say, because you can always be proven wrong easily. It's easier to say something in the past will never happen, because you're not going to get proven wrong. It's in the past. But with time travel, I think there's a chance that maybe not physically, but mentally you can be somewhere, like the virtual reality thing. I think if you get to the point where your body may be in one place, but your mind and everything else will be somewhere else, whether it be inside of a program somewhere else, like you're in some type of AI in the future, but your body will be somewhere.
What if we create to where just paying off of X-Men Days of Future Past, how they have Wolverine go back in the past, his mind go back in the past because he was there. What if that's our sense of time travel, where we can't go in the future because we haven't lived it yet, but we can jack ourselves into the past, be like, oh, I was born in 1990, so from that point on, I can live on because I can travel to myself in that state.
Well, that's my thing with the virtual reality. I think it's already to the point where you could literally sit in a room with a Chinese family eating dinner and look around, and it feels like you're there. So to put yourself into some type of computer that's actually in that room and to be able to interact would be mind-blowing, because your mind plays tricks on you. Yeah. It'll feel like you're there, almost to the point where if you're watching a 24 trailer and there's guns and stuff shooting around it, you think it's coming at you, and it could. I mean, how real is real when it's all your mind playing the tricks on you? I
guess how I would have to say that would be a possibility where it could actually be counted as time travel would be there would have to be physical ramifications to it. It would have to be a thing where, like the virtual reality from that Black Mirror episode with the video game, how it actually affected his mind when he was living through that experience of the haunted house, the video game one, and how it actually affected him physically at the end. You would have to have physical ramifications for that to count as our version of time travel.
Yeah, I think full-on physical
because otherwise it's a video game.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, depending on how realistic that video game can be, I mean, at that point, what's real, what's not real? I mean, is it if you feeling it's real makes it real? I mean, like you said, if it starts messing with you physically, then I mean, that's as real as it needs to be, right? All mental.
And I guess that would have to count too if there's so many what ifs, because if you have this hive mind where all of our collective consciousness are tied into this hive mind where we can access, all this knowledge and all this database, and if you're using that as your medium to travel to the future or travel to the past, I guess you could travel there and go find out what was going on, especially the future. But until you interact with someone over there and they can sense that you are there as well and have an actual full-on interaction with physical ramifications, I think that's the only way it counts as true time travel. You have to be able to interact, not just digitally. It has to be like an actual ramifications physically. Like there has to be like butterfly effect type stuff that happens.
Right.
I think it could happen digitally. I hadn't even thought about that before you brought that up.
Oh yeah, digital. That's one that that's not even like 100 years down the road. That's like probably 10 years down the road. I think that's just going to be a thing. And it already kind of is with FaceTime and stuff like that. You are in two places at once. It's just not time travel at that point yet.
But is that time travel? That's what's crazy too.
With time zones and stuff like that. See, that always messes with my head too. I just,
talking to somebody in the future, technically.
I also, man. That's a whole other conversation, because then you start thinking, what's time? People tell you what time is and this and that, or unless you're going off of the sun, and it's a whole nother thing. But I don't know.
Right now I can hear Harari's voice going, "This is a fiction."
Yeah, exactly. God, it makes me upset because I no longer know what's real. I no longer know what's fake. I don't know what's up, what's down. I don't know what the present or the past is, and I've opened my mind to a point where I believe everything, but I don't believe anything. So now I don't know where I'm at. I don't know if I should go to the future, if I should go to the past. I don't know if I should make a left or I should make a right, because I don't know what is what anymore. I mean, Danny, you listen to podcasts and stuff as much as I do. I mean, what has become reality to you? Do you just...
I think just growing up, I think exposing yourself to new mediums of thought, I think being open-minded and being, having this ability to actually be, open and responsive to different ideas, I think that's almost a form of opening your mind to this idea of having, you could actually bring different parts of this time travel idea and knowing what's a fiction, knowing what's not a fiction. You could bring that all into your mind just by being open to it. Like, I'm way more open-minded in the last few years than I was before. And I don't know if that's just growing up. Maybe that's what it is. It's just growing up. But it's also like, I'm learning not to take things at face value anymore. You have to really open your mind to it and be open to the possibilities, which is why it's interesting when you bring up like the time travel stuff digitally. Like that, just, I had never thought of that before. And now I believe time travel could be a thing, and I didn't at first.
Yeah. Take that. No. One question: if we do the whole time travel thing and go into the past, do we go into the past with the same views and thoughts that we already have? Because if so, if you're going to the past and have that, like we have that open gray area mindset, is that going to be looked at differently back then? Because like you said, bathrooms, there's only right or wrong, male or female. So do you get looked at differently? You would have to at some point. Or would you change all of your views just because that's where you live now?
I mean, wouldn't you have to kind of conform in order to kind of blend in with society?
But do you want to conform?
That's the thing. I mean, it's really person to person.
And then if so, do you start this whole thing that we have now in the past because you have this view that's different than others? And isn't that how it all starts? It starts with one person having a different view and then creating this snowball effect of we need 20 different bathrooms?
All I would do is hot tub time machine it and just put my name on everything that's great, like Google, and be a part of the Beatles and make a ton of money.
Such a villain, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so true.
How would you not want to do that?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's that power complex,
Yeah,
to totally write like, the famous songs before they were written and all that. But okay, here's my thing. Whenever I was a kid and thought about time travel, I didn't get too much into the scientific part of it. I got into the thing of the absolute, am I going to live or am I going to die in the past? So I remember reading a book, Timeline, by Michael Crichton. They made it into a movie, which was not even close to what the book was, which is such a hipster thing to say. But the book is one of my favorite books I've ever read because it explores this idea of this scientist going back to medieval times to figure out like the story behind this thing that he's digging up. And what happened is there was no butterfly effect, but it was more like if the person died, they died in that time. And so they were buried at that time. Like they actually took up a whole new life when they went back, but they could come back to the future and live their life again. So one of the guys went back, he died, and like they literally dug deeper into the cathedral that they were excavating, and he died in the book, but he was like, they found his gravestone and he was married and they saw that he had a whole life in the past. It was super fascinating. So it's a really good read. It's really fascinating. Gerard Butler was in the movie, I think.
Oh, okay.
But in my idea of the past growing up as a kid, it was, I'm okay with going to the past, but if I'm going to die in the past, like say I go back to the Roman days or the Civil War or, the Industrial Revolution or something, the only way I die in the past is if I was meant to die that day in real life, like here. Like if I was meant to get in a car crash on the way home, then I'm okay with dying as a Roman legionnaire back in like the year, 190. So I was like, I will live for sure in the past. Like that, there's no chance I'm going to die unless I was actually meant to die in 2017. So that was like my idea as a kid of time travel. And I was like, I'm staying away from the science.
So
too much to think about.
In a sense, death has its choice, basically.
Yeah.
If it's your time, it's your time, no matter where you're in the future or in the past.
Like you take a segment out. So say like, you're going to live for 60 years. Say I'm going to live from, 2000 to 2060. You just cut that piece out.
Yeah.
Like you're cutting out an audio file and plug it in, in the year 300 and you live to 360. Like that. I think that would be my ideal.
It's like a
time travel thing. Yeah.
Tip over the hourglass and once the last sand hits.
There's no escaping the Grim Reaper, basically.
Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it too. I didn't really think about that. I think that gets a little deeper. That's more a little more, maybe biblical than anything.
Yeah. That's that religious background I grew up with. It was like dealing in absolutes.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that think that way too. But out of pure curiosity, man, it just past or future, I think that's just a question that everybody's going to have, even in the future. Let's say 100 years from now, they're still going to have that same conversation. Be three guys sitting at a table saying, "Man, wouldn't it be cool to go back to 2000 and see how things were?" It's like, probably shouldn't. If I could go there and be like, "Nah, it was all right. Don't worry about it." But
and I bet you that's how people in the past are. They're like, "Oh man, like 7 of my 9 children died, before the age of 5. It was not cool, bro."
Yeah. I think more a deeper question would it be better to go back and talk to someone in the past and get their views on how life is, or go into the future and get their view of how life is for them? Not your own perspective, somebody else's perspective that's living it, so they could tell you, "Oh, you know what? It's not fun. It sucks. I wish I can go back in time." Just kind of see what others' perspectives would be on those time zones.
That would just be interesting, just because we just think it's great in the 60s or great in the World War II era, great X amount of years in the future, because you didn't really say a year for you, Noel.
Oh, dude, because I don't even know. Because like I said, I don't want to pick a year and then all of a sudden show up and there's freaking hell raising. Like,
there's no Earth. It's just literally an inferno because we all used atomic bombs on each other.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to show up to that. That would suck. That'd be hot.
You die.
But yes, it would be very interesting to talk about somebody and see what it's like for them to live in that era, because we have this preconceived notion of how they would be living. I mean, who's to say it wouldn't be the worst time ever? But history has said that, it was a great time. You took a lot of drugs and it was a fun time, but really it was probably the worst era in human history.
Yeah, so much unrest. But here's the caveat with talking to someone from the past or future. Would you want to talk to them while they're in their place and that you went there, or are you going to bring someone from the 1860s into today and have him see a computer screen and lose his fucking mind? Like
Bill and Ted style?
Yeah. You know what that would happen. Like, that would literally happen. Someone would come in and they would their brains would fall out of their ears. Like, I don't think that would work. You'd have to go back and talk to them and interview them back then.
We couldn't time travel 2 different people at this table now and have them sit and have a conversation.
Oh, they'd be poking at this microphone.
There's no way.
Well, one would be judging everything because they're like, "What's with all this old technology?" And the other one would be like, "Oh my God, what is going on?"
Let's take this back to my time.
It's almost kind of like when you're talking to your parents and teaching them how to use an iPhone. That's what it comes down to. Try to get your grandma to use a tablet. It's like, man.
Super annoying.
All right. So I'm still going for the past. Trevor?
I was already torn on this one, so...
Would you rather go with the known or the unknown? Because that's really what the question is.
You're on the fence about this?
I was on the fence about it
from the start.
From the get-go.
We should have been sitting here trying to do a little debate about how to get him to pick our side.
I think we kind of did.
It's tough because, I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, like I would love to see what technology holds in the future.
You want that iPhone 38.
I'm not an iPhone user, so I would not want
Androids.
that.
Okay, well,
iPhone's going to eat Android
Galaxy
by the
38.
time
I mean, it's not much different, man.
Oh, it's a huge difference.
Huge.
It's going to be huge difference. Huge.
But the things I know for sure, I mean, music was so much better back in the 60s and 70s, so I would probably still pick that time.
God, in the future, they're going to be talking about like dubstep, and they're going to be like, "Oh man, that was the classic stuff." What is it going to sound like in the future?
Dude, the joke that always gets me all the time is with music and how it is we're going to be grandpas listening to Eminem in our car, freaking bumping, freaking Lose Yourself down the street. And kids are going to be like, "What the hell's going on over there?" Like
Stewie in Family Guy. Yeah. Back in my day, we had real artists. We had Katy Perry and Justin Bieber.
Exactly. Man, that's a trip. So, Trev, where are you at?
I'm going the past.
Yes.
You sell out. I'm sticking to the future, man. Sticking to the future.
Hey, man, I want to be...
This would be a good poll. This would be a good poll to put up and see what the listeners would choose.
Fair enough. So, listeners out there, go on to our Facebook, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We'll put a poll up, and you tell us future or the past.
I want to see if my 60-40, my educated scientific guess of 60-40 is actually really true for choosing the past over the future.
All right, I'm counting on you guys. Let's see how it works out. That's all for today's episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes to get all updates on future content. And just remember, it's not important who's right or wrong, but it's always important to ask why.